So hi, my name's Danny. I have a ton of freckles, and I grew up being older than most of you in a time and place when this was about the least cool thing that a face could have on it. However, and I used to hate them, but now I actually quite like them. So, swings and roundabouts. How's that? To address this problem. I mean, is design thinking really bullshit? Is it just smoke and mirrors? Kind of a snake oil? I think we can reinterpret it as something like putting people at the center of your work maximizes the chances of that work being meaningful and impactful. Which, when you think about it, is actually a fairly good basic description for what human-centered design is all about. This is a working definition that I just made up, so probably anyone who has spent time in this field will disagree, which I think is part of it. But human-centered design focuses on understanding the perspective and needs of the personal people who experience a problem and uses this understanding as a foundation from which to develop solutions. Typically, in design thinking, you'll start with a broad question. You'll have a multi-dimensional problem. The exploration you'll do will be driven by needs, not hypotheses. You're going to be working usually with really early ideas that are typically pre-market. You're going to be exploring, not refining, and the focus is more on validating opportunities through testing. So in other words, design thinking usually helps generate new ideas for new offers that can be tested to determine which of those ideas is most desirable, feasible, and viable. So instead of a broad question, as in design thinking, you usually have a targeted question or assumption, and rather than a multi-dimensional complex problem, you'll usually have a narrowly defined one. You often work in a way that's hypothesis-driven instead of needs-driven. If you have a product that's typically already in market, already has users engaging with it, and you're going to be focused on refinement as opposed to exploring. And the testing you do is usually to validate solutions, not opportunities. So, okay, back to the original question. Is design thinking and human-centered design bullshit or not? Well, in that article from Natasha Jen, she states that design thinking marketing needs to stop enchanting industries with a diluted design process. The reduction of a complex creative problem-solving mindset into 5 steps makes design seem easy when it's not. So, her problem with design thinking is that it's being sold kind of like, like a ready-to-wear suit or something that you can just put on and use straight away, when in fact it's more like, a specialist sewing machine with a ton of complex instructions. And like any worthwhile skill, I think design thinking it's acquired through time, patience, experimentation, and failure. So, to try and tie this all together, I've got 5 thoughts. I would argue, first, that work that's worth doing should make an impact in the world, right? That impact can be many things. It could be a campaign that changes people's perception of a brand or a product, or it could be a new product that improves the lives of, a marginalized group in some small way. The point is, without impact, you might find that you're doing what I was doing at the start of my career, which is producing vapor work in a vacuum. But however you want to define impact, the real world is always super complex. And the process of creating impactful work in a complex environment is never going to be simple. The result of the work can occasionally appear to be simple, but the process involved in getting there almost never is. But frameworks don't actually exist in the real world, like those that have found such success peddling design thinking and human-centered design. They exist in order to make a complex process graspable. And so it seems to me the problem with design thinking is not that a simple framework exists, it's that there's an expectation that it will be simple to implement. And I think that what sets us apart as professionals is our ability to deeply understand these frameworks so that when they inevitably don't actually play out as you expect when you're in the middle of them, you have the skills and experience to make sure that these things actually still somehow work out. So my experience tells me that design thinking and human-centered design is categorically not bullshit. In fact, they are frameworks that can lead to profound insight and pretty impactful work. Condensing a complex process down into something digestible and graspable also isn't bullshit, but creating the expectation that implementing that complex process that implementing the complex process is going to be as simple as describing it, sure, that's bullshit. I guess to put it another way, you should describe a problem, or you should describe a process in a simple way while also understanding that it's going to play out in a more complex, messy way, much like this. The end.
It's like sending a sewing machine with an instruction manual, right? So that, but then bringing in someone who's really good at sewing to sit there with, with that person and be like, what are you doing? Well, if you look here on page 15, I'm doing this, right? Like this becomes sort of more intelligible now, but it's also not, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're a crafty sews person.